Hello there, it's the Eurogamer.net podcast number 96, I think. I think it is. I did try to check. But then this browser crashed.
How hard did you try, Tom?
Well, I tried to open the browser on this very old laptop that we record the podcast on, and it sort of made the whole thing go a bit wonky, so I closed it again.
Yeah, wise.
So I got that far. This is a fine effort for a Monday morning, I thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, joining me, John Bedford.
Hello.
Hello, John. And Oli Welsh is here.
Hello.
How are you doing, Ollie?
I'm all right. I'm just back off holiday, and I'm very relaxed. I'm slightly hairy.
You've got a coffee in one hand.
Yeah. And a beard on my face.
And a beard on
And I don't care who knows it.
Very nice beard it is too. It's kind of getting towards Martin Robinson levels.
Steady on.
Anyway, this week's podcast is going to be all about Star Wars The Old Republic. It's nearly a month after release now. Very exciting stuff. Ollie, you reviewed it, gave it 8 out of 10.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about... Yeah, go into a little bit about how you got on with it while you were reviewing it.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, it's no secret if you've been following our coverage of this game that we, and I guess I mean mostly me and John, since we're the kind of lead guys on MMOs on Eurogamer, have been quite sceptical about it. And that was still my feeling after playing on the beta for a while, going into playing the live game for review. Yeah. But the more I played it, the more respect I had for it, to be honest, because it really is a very, very sort of professional and well put together piece of work. And I think kind of the main thing for me is like I joined Eurogamer with like a remit to specifically look at MMOs 4 years ago now. And we were terribly excited at the time because WoW was, still on the up, and it was, the new booming market in games. And then promptly nothing happened. There were that year there were two massive releases, which were Age of Conan and Warhammer Online, and they were both disappointing in various ways. Right. And that's been the case ever since. And all we've had is a case of even the good games like Lord of the Rings Online having to go free to play to survive, and the sense that WoW could never be beaten, and the market has been a fairly depressing thing to cover, really. And it was just ultimately it was a huge relief to play a game and find that someone had, by dint of a ridiculous amount of hard work and an insane budget, been able to take on WoW on its own terms and produce something that, more or less, not in every single detail, but more or less is able to compete with a very refined 7-year-old game by an incredible developer. And that's in terms of covering MMOs, that's really, really good news. Yeah. I think, if you read my review, you could probably pick up that there's still things about the game that I don't particularly like, but that's kind of, it's more on a personal level. A lot of it's to do with BioWare's storytelling style and how I feel that meshes with the MMO, which is, not perfectly, but actually, again, not as badly as I thought it would. So, yeah, I guess grudging respect and admiration. Like I say, there's stuff I didn't like about it, but do you know what? If I hadn't been going on holiday on New Year's Day, I would probably still be playing it now, because it totally sucked me in. By around the mid-20s, leveling wise, I was there. Yeah. I had enough different things on my to-do list that I really wanted to get done. And by the time I'd have ticked all of those off, this is how these games work. By the time I'd have ticked all of those off, I'd have had a whole bunch more. And the basic gameplay, especially in terms of the dungeons and the PvP, I was really enjoying. So can't argue with that.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Ollie as well on opposed to sort of playing in the beta and preview events and what have you. Once it's gone live, it kind of highlights the things that you maybe take for granted in an MMO launch, that it is stable. Queues are always going to be a part of any MMO launch.
They settle down to something acceptable within 10 days, 2 weeks. And really the server performance particularly of the game has been, I think it's absolutely outstanding, considering how insanely busy it was. And there's barely been a busier online game since WoW launched. I think I don't think I got kicked once from live servers, which is incredible.
No, I don't think I experienced that either.
So what's almost... I haven't actually played the game myself. I'm kind of interested in playing it, but it's one of those things I haven't really got around to just yet. Yeah. But what's even kind of more fascinating to me, almost, is the kind of reaction to people who have played the game. and how vocal everyone is about this game right now. Everyone, for a variety of reasons, and it is kind of interesting. I guess it's due to a number of things. I guess it's because it's an MMO, because it's Star Wars, because it's EA, it's BioWare, it's up against WoW, it's a subscription model. There's always different things.
The figures that are thrown around about what it cost, and
all these things have kind of collided into this big kind of storm of noise that seems to be surrounding this game at the moment. And a few things that have come up that people are vocal about are some of the technical issues. Such as there's a lot of people saying they're getting very low frame rates on even on high-end PCs.
Well, we found a really odd fix to this, didn't we, over Christmas? Because someone on the forums posted that whatever your rig, if you whack everything up to absolute high settings and then disable all shadows, and my frame rate went from something like 25 to 160 or something. It was absolutely insane.
I was playing it on a pretty aging machine, so I wasn't that surprised that I was having frame rate troubles. But then John told me that basically turning shadows off was the fix, and it's a shame for the look of the game because it does look quite a lot more bland if you have the shadows turned off. But it did run after that. It ran like for the hardware I was running it on, it ran fine. So it's not ideal, but compared to the kind of issues that MMOs normally have in terms of server performance and bugginess, and considering that there is a workaround, I'll take it. I mean, it's annoying because otherwise the engine appears to be quite well optimised, but there's some issues that are making it run poorly on every PC, which is obviously not how you want it. But
there was kind of a strong reaction. We ran a news story. I think it was the game director James Olin was quoted as saying, "The thing is, for the most part, 95% of our players aren't really having performance concerns."
Well, that probably means 95% of their players aren't reporting performance issues. There's a lot of people won't know that the game is supposed to run at 60 frames instead of 20 on their machine.
Okay,
but I think because like MMOs aren't the MMO game playing audience isn't as tech savvy as the normal sort of profile for a PC gamer. They're not necessarily kind of performance focused people. They'll just be running it on. Well, not on their Macs because there isn't a Mac client, which, by the way, I think is a real missed goal for this game. But hopefully there'll be one soon. But people will be running it on all kinds of hardware, and they won't necessarily have expectations of how it will run. But I mean, I certainly hope that stuff's fixed soon. But it's not. This is something that's come up. You may have seen Tom's post recently about our reader survey.
Yep.
And. It's something that came up in that is that you guys want to see us, being a lot tougher on bugs and unfinished gaming clients and so on. And we're generally down with that, and we totally understand why you want to see that, and we want to improve our coverage of it. It is the one thing I would say is very difficult is like you don't always have the issues. And frame rate aside, I had absolutely no problem with the Old Republic, which is why I mentioned in the review. But
one thing that's quite strange that I've only noticed, I mean, after a month of playing, and literally only in the last couple of days, is I did notice a lot of texture pop happening. Like you can stand next to something, and a lot of the Old Republic has these very bold, clean palettes, one colour palettes. And you kind of don't notice it until you notice it the first time, and then you realise 5 seconds after you stood next to a wall, bang, a texture pop comes in. And I've actually only noticed that in the last few days, and I'd kind of be interested to know.
I did see that, but my hard drive was really struggling with this game. The sheer amount of data it's flinging around. I really wished I had a solid state drive to install it to, because in that sense, I was getting quite a lot of lag going into conversations as well. But I mean, like I say, I wasn't playing on the best PC in the world, so I didn't know whether that was my kit really, rather than the game optimization.
Well, one thing to add to what Tom was just saying about that statement that 95% of people aren't having problems, where they kind of went wrong with that statement was saying, and it'll be people with low end PCs, and then of course you get a stream of people saying, okay, so my 2 gig graphic card, my i7 processor, and all this lot clearly isn't cut out for your game. That's kind of where the statement was worded rather poorly.
That did kind of rub people up the wrong way. Actually, I was on the official Star Wars forums this morning, and people are still linking to that article whenever someone brings up the issue of FPS on their machines. So
I'm not saying it's not an important issue, but I do think that a lot more could have gone a lot more wrong with this game. And at least there, we know that there is a workaround, and I was able, on an older, less good machine to get it running perfectly well enough.
Yeah, okay. How difficult do you think it is for BioWare to address issues like this? Obviously, the people who do have problems are going to be the guys who shout the loudest, make the most noise. So, how difficult is it for BioWare to prioritise this kind of thing when they've got...
It's always a nightmare, and it's even worse with MMOs. And you do have a vocal minority. You've always got vocal minorities. And you have to bear in mind that it is a minority. Their to-do list is going to be incredibly long, and I think the problem for their project managers now is going to be deciding what they really, really need to do next. And they seem to be focusing on content, at least in terms of their messaging. It's like, we're going to keep pushing loads of content.
There's a new Flashpoint,
and I think that's going to be really important in 6 months' time to have. But right now, I would be concentrating purely on bug fixes. That's really it's got to be the top priority for the game right now. And it's like I say, I think it's in pretty good shape. But that's far more important than trying to get new content pack out next month. Which is this month even.
And in defence of sort of taking that position, you're always going to have people who get to max level in 3 days. Okay, they understand that they can't expect to have reams of content.
True enough.
So better to get the experience for the majority of people right.
Yeah, I think so. Plus, they have shipped a stupid amount of content anyway. If you're provided you're willing to roll multiple characters. If not, then it's a little bit thin at max level, but it's acceptable. I would really sort of focus on these issues first, and they really need to be aware of that. But BioWare's never run a live game like this before. You know what I mean? They've made big releases, no doubt, and on PC, and they understand the patching process, but they've never run an active community of gamers who are constantly logged into their servers. So I think they'll have a pretty steep learning curve in terms of managing that community. But at the same time, you've got to learn when to tune it out as well, because they will have priorities and they have reasons for those priorities, and they can't let even 5,000 or 6,000 angry people on the internet worry them too much when they've got 2 million mouths to feed.
Yeah, on that point, it's kind of a big week, I guess, because it's, I guess towards the end of the week, the
subs will come rolling round.
Free trial for a lot of people will be up, and then there'll be people making decisions about whether or not to stick with it and start paying for the game, or to duck out. Any sort of predictions on how you see that going?
Oh my word!
I haven't been. The things I've been on holiday, so I haven't been plugged into the game for a couple of weeks.
Good dodge.
But my feeling is it's going to be fine for a few months. I think they're going to have subscribers for the first 6 months. The game basically is popular. It feels good. It's got critical mass on the servers, and there isn't the Warhammer thing with them all with the servers being incredibly busy and then dropping off. I'm just not getting that feeling at all.
And the game isn't really
as far as I know, sorry.
So I was going to say the game really isn't dependent on that same sort of critical mass where you have to have well-balanced servers.
Gameplay-wise, no. Yeah, gameplay-wise, no. But it's important to any MMO that it feels busy when you log in. And as far as I know, they're still opening new servers. So, I've always felt this game would be fine for the first few months, and playing it totally convinced me of that. It just felt like the game was in a good place, and that there was a huge amount of content. And I think the people who do like it, they're going to like it for the stories, and the best aspect of the stories is the class stories. And once you've played one, you're going to want to experience, I think, at least one or two others. So I do see people re-rolling characters, even if they're not that compelled by the endgame content. Yeah. So I think they're going to be good. Where I see this game in trouble is at 6 months to a year's time, really, when I fear, and this is what I was driving at with the conclusion to my review, I fear that it's going to find itself in the same kind of trouble that WoW's in now, a lot quicker, because it is essentially the same kind of game. Yeah. And a lot of its audience are going to be very familiar with that experience from WoW, a really huge proportion, I think. And so I think they're going to tire of it a lot quicker than they did WoW. So,
especially if the reason for sort of tiring of WoW is because of the underlying mechanics, which, as you said in the review, this is fairly but rightly a very similar to World of Warcraft in terms of mechanics.
From from what little I know about what they're planning for updates, I think they feel that, I mean, obviously they know they need to add new dungeons, particularly their raids, which are called operations, I think. They're aware of that, but they want to add huge new storylines. That's their selling thing, because that's how they think in terms of their single player games as well, isn't it? In terms of their DLC, is add new storylines that plug into this world.
Yeah, sure.
And I feel like they've shipped a lot of that already, and I think it's the other stuff that is what really binds a community together in a social game. It's the stuff that people can make out of it themselves, and the really broad spread of activities. So,
and they need to get more guild support and community support into the game. I think they've got the single player level up nailed.
Yeah,
but there are a lot of missing elements in terms of actually bringing people together for cohesive goals.
Yeah, you can't have everything, but like crafting and trading as well. It's boring stuff.
I do not like the crafting system. I
hate it.
I don't want to send someone off to do it. There's no satisfaction.
Go over the differences between
you pat your wandering animal on the head and say, "Off you go, chap. Go and fetch me a diplomatic mission or some green goo." But one thing I do actually like about it in its defence is that when you do find sort of a mineral node or something to harvest, you can kind of point your creature at it and then you go off and start killing the next thing. So.
Yeah, and I like the slot machine aspect of you hit the crafting thing, which is to send your guy off on a mission to go and make something or trade something, and there's like, oh, what am I going to get? But generally speaking, if you ask anybody in Vegas, they will tell you that a slot machine is not really going to work if it takes 3 to 5 minutes to actually roll the. Yeah, it's just not. You need that for the slot machine game to work. It needs to be instant.
Yeah.
And so the detachment of it, and it just feels like if you want to like optimize crafting, you need to have in the back of your mind, I need to send my guy, like whenever you're not actually needing your guy stood next to you for combat, you're going to need to constantly be sending them away, and it's just a little bit too much micromanagement.
Okay. I think
the auction house is really basic as well. And I don't really, I think that needs an awful lot more development. It's not glamorous or interesting stuff, and there's an extent to which these features in a lot of games, they just get slammed in there so people can say that they've got them, but it's really important to long-term community of the game that you've got a really full-featured auction house that works, or like a proper queuing system for PvP, which it doesn't have yet, or unless like a looking for group interface would be nice. Whether it or not it needs the sort of super slick dungeon finder thing that WoW got, I don't know actually. After getting into the WoW thing where you can just basically instantly queue up a dungeon and you just hit go,
it's a luxury you come to.
It was actually quite nice to have to hang around in the capital city and talk to people in general chat and try and get a group together, and it was like, well, no, this is what I remembered really enjoying from the old days. It's kind of irritating, but it's also when you finally get that group together and it all works.
Well, that was it. It's like you used to hang around a dungeon, someone would go off, you'd been waiting for an hour to get the full group together, the tank would go and have dinner, you'd be spamming the channels, and it was infuriating at the time. And then when WoW kind of got reduced to a bunch of people standing in capital cities, maybe doing a bit of auctioning and then vanishing off the face of an earth into a dungeon, you kind of realised that maybe it wasn't all that bad when you had to kind of work with people to.
And saying that, I never had to wait more than 20 minutes of sort of typing LFG in general chat to get a group together, which for me was as great a sign of the health of the game as anything else. It's that it was really easy to get groups, which is great. That's how an MMO should be.
Are you talking about Star Wars? Or talking about
I'm sorry, I'm talking about Star Wars right now. It's how an MMO should be, is that people should want to group up. Whether they're friends or not, you're in the world together, and you should have good reasons to play together. Yeah, I've got to give the game credit, and this is the one thing that I didn't think it would do during all the whole preview period was I didn't think it would have the social glue, but it does give you, like, at least in during leveling up, it gives you great reasons. What I really enjoyed was the fact that this is something that was present in WoW when it launched, but it's basically been like erased from the game, was that they have like quite hard monsters and group leveling content out there in the world for people to do together. Okay. Like you'll stumble across some monsters that you can't take on just while you're out doing your solo adventuring, and you'll need to group up with someone else if you want to do that mission. They call them heroic missions. It's not just about going into dungeons to play with people. It's like doing it in the world as well. And in WoW, they put in WoW they call them elites. They put lots and lots of that in the original game. These really hard areas out in the world, and because people were generally found it more efficient just to plug on with their solo gameplay, those areas just fell into disuse, and eventually Blizzard have basically knocked most of them down to soloable levels again, and most of the elites have gone from the world, which is a real shame. I'm really hoping that doesn't happen with Star Wars, but the great thing is at the moment the game is busy enough and people are keen enough to experience everything that it's got to offer that it's really easy to get groups together for that as well. So even though I was playing on a server where I didn't really have friends, I didn't really know anybody, I had no trouble at all grouping up and meeting people, and that's how these games should be. So I was really impressed with that and really pleased that they got that stuff right.
Yeah, cool. How do you see the game faring? Obviously, there's a few. There's plenty of competition for Star Wars. Obviously, WoW, but there's an expansion coming, I guess, for WoW, and then there's Guild Wars 2, and then there's other stuff. Is WildStar out this year as well? The NC
I think that's a little way. That's further off.
But either way, there's going to be plenty of competition this year.
I think they picked the right window.
They really
to release,
did.
Definitely. Yeah.
It seemed like it was too late for ages, but actually, they got it. Like getting it halfway in between WoW expansions is perfect.
Yeah.
And getting it once WoW subscribers have started to decline, and that game, my love of it is well recorded, but it's just been too long now, and I don't play it other than for professional reasons anymore, because it's just been too long. I think everyone feels that way, and that's why
everybody just wrung every drop of enjoyment out of it, and it's wonderful. But
it's the perfect. I mean, you can talk about WoW too much in terms of MMOs, but as I said in my review, you have to talk about it in this case because this game is aimed straight at it. It really is. With the exception of the bits of it that are very BioWare, the rest of it is World of Warcraft.
Well, the other thing,
EverQuest. I know that too, but we're talking about the game that is currently dominating the scene, not the one that did.
Well, the other thing to consider is you've not just got the window of when's the next WoW expansion going to come up. If rumours are to be believed, and the schedule suggests that Blizzard's new Titan MMO is next year or whatever point, or maybe the year after, these windows become very, very delicate indeed to get something out, because who wants to go up against that?
Well, I mean, we don't know what Titan is yet.
No,
and
it's an MMO.
Well, yeah. Apart from that, we don't know if it's on PCs. We don't know if it's this kind of traditional EverQuest style game. My bet would be on it being a fairly radical departure from that. The relevant game, in terms of right now for competition, is Guild Wars 2.
Which is something that promises, or seems to promise, kind of a shake-up of MMO mechanics in a sense. So
it really does. I mean, it's to play, it's familiar enough.
Yeah, it's got the underlying action bar mechanics, but
a much more streamlined, with a bit more of a, as you'd expect from ArenaNet, a bit more of a Diablo, slightly faster paced influence, where you're having to pick your skills rather than use all of them. You don't have to pay a subscription for it, but it does offer proper full-scale persistent worlds, which the original Guild Wars didn't. So it does, look and feel like Star Wars or World of Warcraft in that sense. And it's got a radically improved way of delivering content to you, whereas Star Wars still has the basic WoW thing of going and picking up your mission and doing your mission and then going and handing it in, except it's dressed that up with conversation cutscenes basically, whereas Guild Wars you won't even really have that. You'll have conversations with people from time to time, but mostly you'll just be out there doing stuff, and once you do stuff, it's giving you rewards. It'd be much more like playing Batman Arkham City, something like that. You just feel like you're constantly got a to-do list and you're constantly ticking stuff off, and you don't really need to do the legwork, the carry and fetch.
And there's also a slightly compelling, potentially addictive small PC game called Diablo 3 coming out.
Well, it's that where you're going to have to draw the MMO line somewhere, and that isn't on. It's not an MMO. It's a small scale party RPG. And it's a very different gameplay style as well. But it's still going to make a massive noise in PC online role-playing gaming, which is, what we're talking about. And both of those games, neither of those games is going to charge a subscription. They've both got other ways, of making money, making money long term. So those are going to, they're going to present a pretty stiff challenge, and they're going to offer people something different, something much more different to World of Warcraft than Star Wars does.
Yeah. On the subscription model question, I mean, do you think that the Old Republic can have a consistent, throughout this year, can sustain a consistent number of subscribers, say, I don't know what they've got at the moment. They've got 1 million plus right now.
Yeah, I mean, people normally chuck around the figure of 200,000 subscribers for an MMO is typically a success story. Obviously, that's slightly different if you've spent, half a gajillion dollars building your MMO.
Well, didn't they say they needed 500,000 to break even?
Yeah, I think that sounds familiar.
Do you think they can do that? And simultaneously, World of Warcraft it's kind of plateaued. I guess it's gone down a little bit. But do you reckon the market seems to me just eats into itself so much? Like, there doesn't seem to be a lot of expansion there.
Well, yeah, no, because fundamentally, most people aren't going to pay more than one subscription fee. At the end of the day, if you're into that kind of game, you're going to play one subscription one, and you're going to dabble in free ones. And maybe you might play WoW and EVE because those are like incredibly different experiences. I can see you paying a subscription model for both of those. Yeah. Not that there's a fairly narrow kind of crossover in the Venn diagram, and most of it is sat in that chair on the other side of the room.
It could. What if it totally bucked the trend, though? What if it did manage to hold on to like 1 million or so paying subscribers, while WoW also managed to
it can do
keep its level?
The problem they face is they can't really grow, or at least not for quite a while, because the way people launch MMOs has changed. Like when WoW and EVE launched, you started small and you got big, and on very different scales. That's what both of those games did.
Yeah.
Now there's so much anticipation around a game like Star Wars. It sells 2 million copies, and they have to service all of those customers, and they're going to lose some before they start to gain them again, in the best case scenario.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, the problem they then face is it's going to be probably, if things work out as well as they possibly can, it'll still be a year before they can start telling happy stories, because they're going to lose people over the next 6 months. It's bound to happen, especially over the next year as the Diablo and Guild Wars come out, and those players who are just after the next big thing flit onto those. So yeah, I don't know, but I do feel like they can do enough to keep the game afloat and to keep it on a subscription model, which is pretty key. But whether they can do enough to make the gigantic money piles that EA and LucasArts probably want after spending 7 years and hundreds of millions of dollars making this, that is another question. But if they really only need 750,000 people to make it a profitable enterprise.
Yeah. Okay.
But as Dan Griliopoulos pointed out in the piece he wrote, the end of an era piece he wrote for us just before Christmas, there's breaking even or making a profit, but then there's also lost opportunity. There's what could EA have bought with those hundreds of millions of dollars? They could have like 8 Mass Effect games, or what else could they have got that would potentially have made them more money in the long run.
Yeah,
we know they would just have spent it on more Battlefield and Need for Speed. One can dream.
Need for Speed MMO.
There is one of those. It's not very good.
John, I think it's fair to say you're less keen on the game.
I mean, my big obstacle. I mean, I wrote about it on the piece on Saturday about this sort of the anathema I have towards loading screens and sort of sectioning off parts of worlds. The main question I find myself asking, which will almost certainly rub some people up the wrong way, is that if this is a kind of a bold introduction to MMOs where you have a solid single-player story, you've got the narration, I can't help finding myself thinking, how good a single-player RPG is it, even to put into an MMO? And are there other games that I still haven't got around to catching up on that actually my time would be better spent playing?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. What I realised was that the way I had ended up playing it, that I found that I liked best, was I wasn't doing much sort of solo adventuring. I was playing my main storyline plus maybe a couple of other quests. Yeah, and then I was hopping around between the PvP and the dungeons, the flashpoints, and the space combat stuff. Okay. And I really enjoyed that because I could like play one style of gameplay for an hour and a half, and then something else for 20 minutes, and then something else for half an hour, and it was nicely mixed up. But at no point was I really playing an MMO. I was playing a single player RPG, and then a party RPG, and then a PvP game, and then a single player arcade game, and then rinse and repeat. There is an extent to which it lacks that cohesion. Although, as Alec pointed out in his piece, there is still something about going to a capital city, and even if you're just visiting the bank and the auction house, you see all these people running around, and it does add a sense of life. It really does. Or even when you're just down on the questing worlds, the problem is you then go into your personal story thing, and there's a big green barrier, and then you're in your little single player instance, and maybe you've invited a friend with you, but otherwise you're on your own.
Okay.
It doesn't. It doesn't like. It is a good MMO for most of the reasons that MMOs are good, for most of the sort of logical reasons that make sense, but it doesn't quite have the gel. It doesn't quite, hang together. But it's a lot better than I thought it'd be, to be honest. I thought that...
Yeah, that I will agree with.
I thought the single-player stuff would work, the storytelling stuff would actually contradict or butt heads with the multiplayer gaming in a way that was uncomfortable and wrong, and in fact it just adds an extra reason for you to want to stick with with your character and with the world.
And that was a tough question to ask me, because unfortunately I've had to abandon my Sith Inquisitor, and I dearly love my something dark side characters, lightning bolts from the fingers, because I just can't stand his voice acting anymore. It's all kind of like, look, you oaf, I shall jolly well electrocute you in a moment. And it's sort of, I couldn't listen to it anymore. And I made this enormous, the biggest character size you could, bald guy with no neck running around going, my goodness, let's zap.
Is there anything that BioWare can do to get you back on board, or people who have experienced the same problems with you? I mean, these issues sound fairly fundamental, the kind of almost fragmented world. That doesn't sound like something that could be addressed, really.
Yeah, there's just a feeling that I've got too many games to catch up on that are great single-player RPGs, and I'm not feeling the magic from the game. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I think it's an incredibly well-accomplished game, and as Ollie says, there's a ridiculous amount of content, but I don't feel compelled to live there.
Okay.
Something I do worry about with MMOs is it's always your first,
your first love,
which sticks with you. I guess you, John, have been lucky enough to find two of those with Eve and WoW, but I do wonder if any game can ever match up to the one that you really bought into. And I knew a lot of my friends. Well, not a lot, but a few of my friends really, really got into Final Fantasy XI, and then they couldn't get any of the rest of us to come and join them. But they were
on a 16-hour grind,
passionate about that game. And then we all went crazy for World of Warcraft, and they were so, they came and played it, but they were still really bitter about it. And it's all easy mode, and but it kind of is like that, and it's not. I wonder if those games are replaceable. But I have to say, I mean, I'm really looking forward to Guild Wars 2. I really am. I think my problem is with that is I don't really feel like I've got much interest in the world. Guild Wars stuff is very pretty because they've got an amazing art team.
Yeah.
But I don't. Other than that, it's like, well, it's pretty fantasy world. Like Warcraft has the Warcraft thing. It has those crazy races and the kind of cartoony, satirical edge to it. And Star Wars is, Star Wars, for all that I've got some problems with the way BioWare have implemented it. It feels too BioWare-y, too grown up and cold for me,
and not enough stilted sex conversations.
Oh no, there's plenty of those,
and no Wookiees.
Yeah.
Is there no Wookiees in it?
That was like,
Perhaps we can go to my quarters and I shall jolly well electrocute you.
A friend pointed out to me, you can't play any of the cool aliens, or there's no funny little guy or no big monster guy. They're just humanoids, except some of them got funny skin or little pointy horns.
Yeah.
And that is really, but that is because they need to have voice conversation. I really love the idea.
That could get tiresome very quickly.
One day they will bring Wookiees in, and there's a whole army of voice actors who are going to have to spend entire days in recording studios going, I can't even do the noise.
But that's actually, you say that, one of the funnest moments I've had with games in the last 12 months was over Christmas. I got Saints Row the Third when they did that sort of £20 offer.
Yeah.
And setting the voice to zombie, and just playing through this story, which is ridiculous as it is, but you sort of have him going, and then someone would go like, "Are you sure, boss? What are we running into?" These people go, and they go, "Well, okay, if you say so." And if you play this, you can't even play it with subtitles.
Honestly, BioWare, like if you want me back, and I am actually going to carry on playing. I haven't logged in since I got back from holiday, but I'm going to carry on playing.
Yeah.
But if they want me long term, bring Wookiees in. Get those guys recording hundreds and hundreds of hours of garbled roaring.
Put your Wookiee on the table, then we'll talk.
I love the idea of picking from my 3 kind of eloquent little conversation choices, and he just goes,
rip the guy's head off.
But no, I think it is like that side of it is, for me, that's a shame that there wasn't more. Like, the Star Wars universe is fun. It's a really fun universe. It's got loads of crazy aliens and creatures and stuff going on in it, but your options as a player are quite limited to a fairly sort of staid set of mirrored human, human kind of characters. And I wish there'd been, I wish you'd been able to be a Jawa. Like most MMOs like to offer that. They offer the sort of straight edge guy, and then there's the big monster guy, and then there's the funny gnome, and then there's the sort of beautiful, mysterious alien type. And Star Wars could have furnished all of those characters with ease.
Yeah, right.
From its mythology, and you can't get to play any of them because I think it's because they were faced with the fact that they wanted fully voiced story, and so you couldn't have. Well, they do actually have like NPCs speaking alien dialogue a lot, but they, for some reason, they didn't want players doing that. But I think that was a shame. I think that was a failure of imagination.
Yeah.
And I reckon it's a bit drab as well, to be honest. Although, as many people say, it's not actually as drab as modern Star Wars, and perhaps there is there's an argument for that. But either way, it's got the sound effects, it's got the spaceships. They do look awesomely cool. All of the speeders, obviously, it was cool getting a mount in World of Warcraft, but getting to have your own speeder, well, that has got to be brilliant. All that stuff works. So people have an easy investment in that world, and that's, get back to my original point, and that's what I worry about a bit with Guild Wars 2, is that I don't know if people really care about the Guild Wars universe that much. All of the rest of it, awesome, but yeah.
But then as long as you care about the world enough to buy the box, well, then they've got another success from you.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, I think we should probably leave it there then. Thank you very much to John Bedford.
Thank you.
To Oli Welsh.
Thank you.
I was Tom Champion. Thank you very much. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.